Hi, welcome to part 2 of our conversation with the amazing Dr. Desautels from Butler University. In this episode, we discuss how we as teachers and parents can model best practices when it comes to mental health. We talk about whether technology is helpful or less helpful when it comes to our mental health state. And also we look at the Adverse Childhood Experience Study and its implications for the classroom and beyond. Enjoy the episode. So I know you talked about in your previous work how schools of education are not really teaching teaching from the heart and the principles you've been talking about. Do you think they're catching up these days? Well, Butler clearly has your good self, but do you think schools of education are in a place now where they're sort of catching up with the research?
So I can speak for Butler.
Right.
Our dean, Ina Shelley, is a visionary, and she knew of this work, and she intuitively and also researched the significance of preparing our pre-service teachers in this framework, in this discipline. So I think we are at the ground level. I cannot speak to how many undergraduate education programs are implementing this. I think very, very few are preparing our teachers in this way, but I think we'll see a change, especially with the emphasis on social and emotional learning across districts right now. We are bringing in mindfulness programs, and we're using grant money for different programs, but what I would love to see, Adrian, is I would like to see all pre-service teachers prepared in this area. And our undergraduates, when they're introduced to this science, it's about their brain state too as they go through college.
Yeah.
So they're finding this not only helpful as future educators, but learning how to use focused attention practices and brain intervals, and taking care of their own brain state as they go through their courses of study is very powerful and empowering for them.
Yeah.
And that's the one, I want to say this too, this work is implemented perfectly and enthusiastically in schools and districts where the educators themselves are integrating these in their own self-practices. And, I share with administrators, if you want to see this work seed deeply and broadly into your schools, then use these strategies with your teachers.
With your teachers, yeah. I know you've mentioned that self-reflection separates effective and superior teachers. So,
that's right.
You want to say a little bit more about what that looks like for the teacher? What does self-reflection look like?
Well, I think... I've been thinking a lot about self-reflection because it's kind of a trendy, kind of word. So, what the hell does that mean? But I think that it's really about being vulnerable. And it's really about just taking a really kind, compassionate look at where you are. And even if it's not where you want to be, and even if you had a bad day, or as a parent even, I can think of times where I think, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I hadn't, disciplined or punished in that way. But it's really stepping back and just taking a look at, in a kind, compassionate way, this is where we are, and where do I want to go from here?
Yeah.
So it's really looking at this whole brain science and this framework, because it's not a program. Applied educational neuroscience in our homes and in our schools is a framework, and it's really looking at the process of it. It's not, you're never going to get to the end because there is no end. And what I mean by that is that, number one, the science continues, the research continues to grow. Bruce Perry says that, and again, on maybe a mile or 2 mile journey, we are, in our knowledge of brain science, we are about on inch 1. We've gone an inch. So there's so much more to learn, but also brain development, neuroplasticity just changes throughout our lives. So we'll never get it done and we'll never get it right.
Yeah.
But it is, being present. So self-reflection is really being present in the moment. Yeah.
I know you mentioned technology as a possible source of anxiety before, but would you say technology can be helpful or less helpful with this whole field?
So there's been so much, discussion around technology. I've been on some panels in schools, and there was the documentary that went around Screenology, I think, or something, Screenagers.
Okay.
And I think that, number one, technology is not going away. I mean, it's not going away. And so it can be, extremely, I'm so grateful for it because it can be so helpful. We've become global citizens, and we are learning from one another globally, which just is so exciting. On the other side of that is social media. And I, last October, was with a group of adolescents, 11 to 17-year-olds, sitting on a panel. And one of the, I'll never forget this, the little girl, not little, she was 11, she was petite. And we were asking the students, what feels stressful to you at school? And she said, and she immediately, she was the first one to answer, and she just got this really disheartening look on her face, and she said, when I post on Instagram and I don't get a like. And so it is, it's a way of communicating that takes us away face to face, as we all know. We're living in the most connected yet disconnected time in our world's history. Our technology is changing, every few months. And so I think that the key is preparing our children to use it responsibly. And to use it with boundaries. And with structures, and to understand how for many developing brains it can be just a source of great stress. And it can also be a source of great joy. But it's finding that happy medium.
So bringing that idea back to the girl with the Instagram story, how would you apply that in for an example in that situation? How would you help that girl with that sort of situation?
It's really hard because at 11 years old, with that situation, starting around 4th or 5th grade, on up through middle school and early high school, the brain is going through its second greatest time of development. And I say to my fifth graders, who are 10 and 11, I say to them, whatever you want to do as you get older in high school and college, start doing that now, because your brain is sticky, meaning that the brain is going through proliferation and consolidation. And so we know experiences are the number one ingredient that build either healthy brain architecture or toxic brain architecture. So for this little girl that is 11 years old, that is, got that remark on Instagram, we would have to really sit down with her as a teacher, as a parent, and really help her to look at that from different angles. This doesn't define you. There are, what's the perspective here? What's the perspective here? So it's helping to build her perception in different areas. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. No, that makes total sense. We at Park Tudor, we use our advisory, our homeroom periods once a week, and we talk about specific situations that they might find on social media, and we try and talk through it. But I think just introducing this language of what is happening to anxiety, what is happening to your brain, and I love that idea of stickiness. That's a great bit of language that kids can understand.
Absolutely.
So that's really great. I look forward to taking that back. We're coming towards the end of our interview today, but I was just, I know there's a study that you've talked about, the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And I'd love to know more about that, and if you could talk about that and just the implications for that in our classrooms.
And, so as I explain that to Adrian, I would love to to know from you what you see in the middle school.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. So the Adverse Childhood Experience Study was conducted in the late 90s. And it was kind of an accidental public health study. It was originally an obesity study.
Okay.
And it was conducted by the Centers for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente Health Organization. And so what they discovered, these two researchers, two scientists, Vince Felitti and Robert Anda, they came together, and what they found, they interviewed 17,500 adults. And this is what's interesting. They asked them a series of questions based on, I believe, 10 indicators of adversity. So, and based on the number, your score, the higher your ACE score, the more ACEs you have had in your birth through age 18, the higher the dose-response relationship to mental and emotional and physiological health outcomes. So ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, are quite common. They are a part of all of our lives. We all have them. Some of us have 2. We come into our place of work or we teach. We have 2 ACEs. Some of us have 6. Some of us have 10. But ACEs, let me give you some examples. If you grew up in an environment where there was significant neglect, that's an ACE. If you grew up in an environment where one of your caregivers was going through a separation or divorce, that was an ACE. That is an ACE. If you grew up in poverty, that's another ACE. If you grew up with a caregiver who was going through addiction or alcoholism, that's an ACE. Mental illness, depression, anxiety from a caregiver, that's an ACE. Sexual abuse, physical abuse, social rejection, humiliation, domestic violence, all of these are ACEs. And what we know is that children and adolescents who walk into our schools and our buildings and districts with 4 or more ACEs are 32.6 times more likely to have academic and behavioral challenges.
Wow.
And it's really important for us as parents and educators to know this. Traditional discipline does not work with children and adolescents who are communicating opposition, defiance, aggression, shut down, apathetic, unmotivated behavior. It doesn't work with these students because what we are unintentionally doing is escalating that developing stress response system, and we are not getting significant behavioral changes. And this is really, as a parent, as an educator, I need to understand this, that co-regulation is the new lens for discipline. That'll be another interview.
I have so many more questions, but I think just one more that as a follow-up to that. You know, we don't have kids' ACE scores as they walk into our building, and I teach a lot of 6th grade kids, and you know, we talk to the 5th grade teachers about them and try to get to know them before they walk through our doors, but we don't have their ACE scores and we don't know everything about their lives outside of school. So what is it we can do to get to know the kids, but you know, clearly keep their privacy, but get to know them and help them? What signs are we looking for?
So another great question, Adrian, and you don't know their ACE scores. You can't. But here's what, and when you think about it, you really have a sense for what a child or an adolescent that you have. You may not know in August when the student is new, but as you said, you talk to 5th grade. You know, we collaborate. You know, and we know which kids are coming in pretty rough. We know which kids are consistently dysregulated. And so you don't need to know the actual number, but what you can focus on, looking at patterns. You know, if a student in 5th grade is coming into 6th grade and that student really struggled chronically all the year before, then we know we've got to dose that student. We call those touch points. We've got to dose that student with connection and attachment, build relationships, strengthen those. It takes 30 seconds. It's the way you look at a child. It's your tone of voice. It's checking in with them. How are you feeling today? You know, what do you need from me today? What can we do to make this better? And you may not get the answer from them, but they hear you.
Yeah.
So we know that our basic needs, it's not food and water. Our basic needs with everything that we're talking about today is attachment and then regulation. So when we can begin to strengthen and to build relationships with these kids who come in so rough, that is, we're halfway there, if not more than halfway there.
Yeah.
It matters. Relationships matter. They change the neurobiology.
Well, that sounds like a great place to end, but I have so many more questions, but we have to end it there. Dr. Laurie Desautels, thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Adrian, for the great questions, the great discussion, and I look forward to more.
That was Dr. Laurie Desautels of Butler University. If you'd like to know more about this topic, I highly recommend you check out her new book, Eyes Are Never Quiet, which is now available from all good book retailers. If you'd like to hear more from some of the amazing guests that we've had on the show so far this year, do subscribe using the links in today's show notes. Thanks for listening. Do join us again.